Hello everyone, Danusia here. I'm joined today by Christine Armstrong, author of The Mother of All Jobs, How to Have Children and a Career and Stay Sane-ish. We'll be talking about the lies we tell ourselves and others about what it means to have it all, the pressures and expectations that weigh down working parents and the systemic issues that perpetuate these challenges. But it's not all doom and gloom. We'll also explore practical strategies for individuals and families and discuss how we can collectively work towards creating a more supportive and equitable environment for all. Let's get going, shall we? So welcome, Christine.
Thanks for having me.
Where should we start with lies?
Well, for me, the lies started with when I first was trying to work full time with one and then two small children. I was finding it incredibly difficult and I was looking for the answers, basically. I was really struggling. I was really stressed. And so I thought I would go and interview people who had big jobs and small children. And we called them the power mums. And I convinced the editor of Management Today to let me go and talk to them. And the conversations were a total ruse. It was really that I needed someone to tell me the answers. And the interviews were kind of an excuse to get people to bridge, basically.
Isn't that a great way to do it?
I was just calling all these really, successful, important people with kids and going, hi, can I come and talk to you? And they were very generous with their time. And what I came to understand is that if you're in a job and you've got a family and you're finding it quite hard, it's really difficult to talk about that beyond a very, very small group of people who are your close family and friends. And the reason is that obviously your employees will read it, your boss will read it, your team will read it. If you're in a senior role, which many of the people who comment on these kind of issues are, then your shareholders will read it. The people who might promote you to your next job, headhunters, whoever. And so it made me realize that we have this very untrue narrative about working parenting in this country at the moment, which is that if you work really hard and you're really ambitious and dedicated, it's absolutely fine. And the reality is more complicated than that. The dominant media narrative is the one that if you work really hard, it'll be fine. There is an underlying social media and friendship group narrative, which is like, my God, this is so hard. But I got 1,000 messages when my book came out from people saying, oh my God, why is this the first time anyone said this publicly that I can read? Like, I thought it was just me. And so I am really concerned that this dominant media narrative by very, very successful women, which is well-intentioned, I'm not in any way having a go, is actually making lots of people feel like they're failing.
Yeah, it is. It's so sad that women who've worked so hard to get to where they are, I can only assume, and actually some have told me, it's too dangerous. It's just too dangerous, too vulnerable to stand up and say, here's what it's really like. No, it's not true that if you work hard, you can make all this work, because actually the structures aren't there for that to happen. It is sad that we've got this, but it has to change.
I think it's sad because it's dishonest and because it makes other people feel like they're not trying hard enough or it's some fault in them or their family that they can't make it work and thrive. We have to be really honest about the fact that you can't work a 14, 15, 16-hour day and care for a family and feel perfectly calm and happy. It just doesn't work out. So, everybody's got to make their own decisions about this. And unless we have that conversation, then I think we're profoundly disempowering people.
How are you doing it?
Well, I changed the way that I work completely because of my interview. And what I've taken away is that people who are able to take control of their time seem to be much, much happier. Even if they're still working long hours, if they're choosing when those hours are, if they're choosing what those hours are, then they seem to be much more stable and much happier. And so that's really how I designed my life. About the time we had our third baby, I stepped out of sort of formal corporate work and co-founded a consultancy which had no fixed hours and no fixed holidays, where essentially you get paid for the work that you do. And that worked really, really well, actually, with small children, because it allowed me to be a professional, to use my professional skills and to be in the world. And so to, do what I'd done for the last 15 years before I'd had kids, but also to be able to be home when I needed to be. And that worked really well.
And how do you break the silence? And it's one mode, how do women who are occupying roles in companies where, this would be can occur, and it would be heinous, actually. It would be suicide, career suicide. How do you do that?
I mean, the truth is that it is very, very hard for an individual person or individual family to try and fix this single-handedly. And so what I think is really important is to have a really, really different conversation about this. And it has to involve a conversation with men. Because if male managers sort of are afraid of this subject, if they feel disadvantaged, which many do, if they feel excluded, if they feel, God, we only ever say the wrong thing, and the women get all the coaching and support, and they get to go to nice women's group events and hear interesting speakers, and we just do the work, what are we the morons around here? Unless we open up that conversation, I don't think that we're ever going to make real progress.
It's a funny old problem, isn't it? I talk with men, consult with men individually and in teams, and we do talk about this, and actually they are equally yearning for something different. Not all men, of course they're not. I'm not blanketing this, but they're really frustrated because actually men's roles have changed dramatically. So this presenteeism, these enormous hours, the demands, the pressures on men, it's hurting them. They want to be good fathers, present fathers, loving fathers, involved fathers, engaged, and they do.
They do, but those men that feel that way find it very hard to say it publicly because basically the stigma and the judgment on them is much harder than on women who say that. And I do think this is part of a very significant generational shift where you've got a group of CEOs and leaders who are largely male, who have grown up in the breadwinner model, who have got partners who've been based at home, raised the children, who really are quite happy to work 12 or 14 hours a day on the whole, who feel well rewarded for that, who feel they've got recognition and authority and quite comfortable with that. And then you've got another generation of men who are looking at their household income and the price of housing and saying, there is no way that I alone could do this. And anyway, I don't want to. And my partner doesn't want to be at home because, social norms have changed and she's very successful and ambitious and wants to do things. So it has to be a much more mixed pattern and it has to be more balanced between us so that we both have the opportunity to work and earn money and also be engaged with that family. But those men who feel that way feel very silent at the moment and very afraid of speaking out. And so part of, I think, what, the job of having conversations with men is to liberate that conversation and make sure that those men aren't belittled for saying something.
Yes, absolutely. I think we've moved from that breadwinner model into a bread sharing model that brings profound changes to our expectations. What about individual women? Because as you said, each family is dealing with this differently.
So the first thing I would say is try not to make it about individual women. I'd look at the whole family structure if you possibly can. Single who might, well, it's just me, which is fair enough. Then that probably was, yeah. But it's kind of looking at your household unit and going, right, what does it take for this unit to operate? Which isn't about one particular child if there are multiple siblings. How does the whole thing work together? And for me, the happiest families that I interview, the most stable, the ones that seem to have it under control, are the ones that see the whole household as one and then make very active decisions. And they are decisions that change as the children get older, as they go to different schools, and they reflect different points in their career. And the most unhappy and frustrated families are those who see it in a much more individual prism of, I want to achieve this, or he wants to achieve that, or this helps school. And it's very fixed and nothing can change. And they're the ones I think that get very, very stressed. So with families that kind of want to say, okay, how do I make this work for us? I kind of go, right, how much time can you cope with working and how much time do your children need? And what does that look like? If both of you could perhaps do a 4-day week, if you could finish at 4 every day, if you could do a 9-day fortnight, if you could work at home every other week, or if you're very happy to work full time, but you've got great support, that also is fine. But being really honest about what allows you to be able to work and flourish, but also that sets aside some time for the parents to be okay, whether there's one or two of them. So if you need to go and do a Pilates class or go for a run or go swimming or, heaven forbid, go and get tipsy with your mates on a Friday night to feel better, then you need to build that in as well. Because otherwise, you can feel like you're holding on with your fingertips and you've got no adult time and no adult company. And certainly in early years, I think everybody does feel like that. I know there'll be mums with small kids going, I've been out of the house for 6 months, not like in the next 6 months, but I get that. But as the children get older, you need to sort of start establishing things that keep you sane. I call them little islands of sanity, the things in the week that you kind of go, okay, if I do that, then I kind of feel a bit better about life. But all of that is about really clear-sighted decision making, which is the easy bit. And then it's about doing it. And that's the much harder bit.
I love that you really draw our attention to household units. So I am a single mother, but I see our family and always have as a business unit. We have to all pull together and actually what does the whole unit need to work? And we have family meetings. They're quite famous in our family is Sunday afternoon, and we all bring it's fun. It sounds a bit much, but it's actually, we bring what we need as and when we need those meetings. And really that's our kind of course correction for, is this working? What needs to be tweaked? Who needs what now? Because of course the beauty of children and the challenge of all of us is we change, we're growing, our needs change. And so, this unit idea is so much better. But and I have friends who it's basically a competition between either who is most tired or whose job is most important or who earns the most and therefore has more leverage. There are so many permutations of this, of basically divisions. And then resentment is enormous.
When I interview families and I say, how do you account for childcare costs? Who pays for childcare? It is almost always perceived to come out of the woman's income. So we are pushing women out of work because they can't cover the childcare, because it is seen not as coming from the household income, but from the mother's income.
Well, that's it, isn't it? That's totally normal. That's the thing.
And this is one of my problems is that, when people say, well, you just need to get really great childcare, that's one of the pieces, you need to find a really great employer to support you. And there's two problems with that. One is that childcare isn't a fixed thing. You don't sort of at 6 months or 12 months go back to work and go tick childcare box. Right, that's done. It's a constantly moving feast and it never stops. So that's one piece of it. And the other, find yourself a good employer. And one of my sort of real kind of takeaways from the interviews that I do is it's nothing to do with having a great employer. You can have the most fabulous employer on paper, and if you've got a manager who's wholly unsupported, it doesn't make any difference. You will still find it incredibly difficult. And when you go into a business, you might be lucky, or you might find a fabulous manager who's incredibly supportive and allows you to be really productive and do the day that you want to do and then leave and rewards you and is grateful for that. And then that manager gets promoted because they're clearly a great manager. And then you get somebody who's called a team meeting at 6:30 and runs it until 8 p.m. because that's when it suits them. And that's what's really, really hard for people.
Yes, you're actually at the mercy of those managers. What a depressing conversation.
I don't want to be the harbinger of gloom, but equally, I think it's much more uplifting to think, or at least it's not me. It's not me and my family failing. It's the whole system has changed and now we need to reconfigure the support around it. And if we're honest about the fact that it's changed, that it's really difficult, then we can reconfigure it. If we keep going around Pollyanna going, it's all great, everything's fine, women are amazing, just work really hard, then we don't change it.
Well, exactly. So I was being stupid, I was just being silly saying it's depressing because at one level, yes, of course, it's a bit of a depressing conversation, but you're absolutely right. We have to take it to this conversation because, that Pollyanna one is total dishonesty. It's not where things are. And we will never create change. And we have to create change. We really do. But what I absolutely adore is that it is not personal failure. It is not about individual women failing, not doing enough, not being enough of a mother or a worker or whatever, or a wife. And it isn't. Every single one of us was straining, trying to find our solutions to an insane structural problem, and it has to. It has to change, as you said, politically. There are a lot of us doing what we can in our own ways to bring some change. And it's not going to happen overnight. But, your book is fundamental in this, in your interviews. Thank you so much for this conversation, Christine. I'm really grateful that you've been on that podcast and brought so much richness to this conversation.
We've covered a lot of ground today. If you're feeling overwhelmed by the work-life juggling act, please remember that you're not alone. There are resources available. Check out my book called Noise, A Manifesto Modernising Motherhood, and Christine's The Mother of All Jobs. Together, we can work towards creating a more supportive and equitable environment for all working families. I really hope you enjoyed today's mini-sode. We'll be back next week. Till then, keep thinking and loving. Take care, everyone.